Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
And we are live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10. This is Govern America with Vicky Davis and Darren Weeks. We are back here again on the 16th of November, 2019. Good to have you along again, as there are very many eventful things happening in our world today, and it's who can keep track of them all. I mean, it's just remarkable. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning. Yeah, I've been trying to catch up.
Yeah.
It's all moving so fast, it's hard to keep
Indeed
it
is. Yeah, did you get your website problems taken care of?
Yeah, I did. Most of them, but I still have a problem. I'll tell you what happened.
Okay.
I don't know. I went to get into my website, going in from cPanel, which is the back end way to get into my website. And I got a message that says, you're not allowed to access this page. Well, that's, a little distressing. I can't get into my own...
your website.
My website, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I had to call GoDaddy and work with them and tried a number of things, none of which worked. Ultimately, after escalating the problem to their really serious tech people, they were able to restore my website back to November 12th.
Hopefully you didn't lose too much.
Well, I didn't lose anything. Great. Because I anticipated, I knew which thing that I wrote that was probably the reason for the problem I was having, so I copied it before I had it restored. I haven't put it back up yet, but
yeah, thank God for those. Thank God for those backups, because they've saved me a number of times. I can't tell you, but just simply by virtue of the fact that your site is there, it's going to be attacked. I mean, it's a public facing thing, and there's no way to shield a website since it's got to be the nature of websites. You got to have them exposed. I mean, you can protect all your computer equipment behind a firewall, but unfortunately for a website, you can't do that for a web server. Well, I'm glad you got it fixed, though.
Well, this was a rather brazen attack, because when it was restored, it was supposed to be restored back to November 12th, but and they did restore the shell back to November 12th, and I know that because of the Govern America advertisement on my front page. Mm-hmm. But the posts that they had in there, the first one, the first post with the feature image was of Donald Trump, where I put a bubble, a speaking bubble, and it said, "Gotcha, suckers." Now, what that article was about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mm. Because Donald Trump, what he did is that he said he would get us out of the TPP. And then a news story came up that said that he was considering going back in, but it was too late for any negotiations. All the negotiations were closed. And so I was really irritated about that he said he was going to get us out of the TPP, but then, he waited until the time had passed for any negotiations, so he would have to go in with whatever it was that was already negotiated. And that really ticked me off. I considered that a betrayal.
Yeah, and Donald Trump is really bad for a lot of those types of things. And see, these are the things that really everybody should be focusing upon. But it's hard to do that when you've got this deep state coup d'etat going on in our country. And there are people that would say that this whole thing is a big dog and pony show to distract. And to a certain degree, that may very well be true, although I genuinely think that there is a coup d'etat going on in our country.
There absolutely is. There are very, very serious issues underlying all the theatrics.
I think that the theatrics, there's many different layers to this onion. I think the theatrics is one layer, and certainly I think that is a coup d'etat going on. I don't think that they want Donald Trump. He's not the chosen one. So you've got a coup d'etat on that level, but then there's all this underlying stuff going on as well that continues to go, and that's the coup d'etat that's been taking place long before Donald Trump ever entered the picture.
Absolutely. I went back this morning and I listened to the testimony of Joseph McGuire. He is the DNI.
Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah, Director of National Intelligence. He is the one that is in charge of the whole police state apparatus, nationally and internationally. Okay, so he's a very important person that almost nobody has ever heard of.
Right.
Okay, and then I started listening again to the testimony of the first day of the hearings. And I think the essence
You're talking about the impeachment hearings.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The essence of it was given by William Taylor.
Right. I got some audio from that, by the way.
Oh, good. Okay, do you have the part where he says that there were two channels of diplomacy?
Yes, I do have some stuff. Before we get to that, I would like to, there's a few things I wanted to get out of the way just so we cover it. Because if we don't, it won't be as relevant next week. First of all, it was the death of the death of the co-founder of the White Helmets this week, and I thought that was worthy of a mention. His name is Le Measurer. He of course, everyone, we've talked about the White Helmets many times on the broadcast. This is the State Department in British MI6 funded propaganda group, which has been responsible for staging scenes and promoting war. Anyway, I got a report from the CBC on his death.
A former British Army officer who helped found Syria's White Helmets has been found dead in Turkey. The White Helmets are a group of emergency medical workers based in rebel-held areas supporting wounded civilians. They're known officially as Syria Civil Defense and have been hailed for saving more than 115,000 lives during years of bombing by Syrian government and Russian forces. The body of James Le Measurer, whose organization Mayday Rescue trained many White Helmet volunteers, was discovered outside his apartment in Istanbul. Freelance journalist Rebecca Collard is in Beirut and has this update.
We know that his body was found around 4:30 a.m. local time, that there was fractures in both his legs. And the last piece of information is that his wife apparently told a security source in Turkey that he had taken a sleeping pill around 4 a.m. and gone to bed. And then she had woken up a while later to this knock at the door and to learn this terrible news about her husband. Now, I think the question, Andrew, at the moment, the key question is going to be, how did this happen? And I think right now the question is, was this foul play? Was this an accident, or was this a suicide? And, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, he was recognized for his work in saving Syrian civilians, for his work with the White Helmets organization, his work was controversial for some people. So, just last week we had Russian authorities tweeting out, accusing him of helping what they call terrorist organizations, saying that he was a member actually of MI6, the British intelligence agency, rather than military intelligence before. So I think because of that, because of the controversy around his work, and because of the sensitivity of what he did, is why we're seeing that Turkey said that they're going to launch quite a thorough investigation, and why there's going to be a lot of attention, Andrew, on this case in the days and the weeks ahead. So a very suspicious death, although not really surprising. Well, you know what? Reports like that really annoy me. I mean, was it suicide, or was he murdered? Well, the guy has 2 broken legs. Do you break your legs before you commit suicide? I don't think so. Well, the way I interpreted that is it sounded like he could have broken his leg when he fell from the balcony. But I don't know. You would have to land a certain way. Yeah, I mean, there's I waxed poetic, Vicky. I wasn't going to do this, but I wrote a poem, having been inspired by these events, and it's called Deep State Shill. I'll just read it real quick. An operative and a deep state shill, receiving the orders from Capitol Hill, lying and killing for nefarious reason, some might go so far as to call it treason. Arranges he the propaganda and deception, attempting to sway the public perception, controlling the thoughts of the people's mind, tether them with the heavy shackles that bind. Bow to your masters, to evil pay homage, glut yourselves on the rewards they promise. Licking their boots, hope to you they'll be kind. To the suffering you create, you will be blind. Swimming pools, yachts, suburban expansion. Add another wing to the Virginia mansion. Damn all humanity and its children to hell. It doesn't matter as long as you're living well. Grovel to Satan as you murder, deceive. No one knows the evil that you conceive. Constitution is dead, is what you believe. No Bill of Rights when there's money to bleed. But looking ahead when the mission is won, projects winding down, agents' work is done. Many assignments where ethics were blurred. Mafia bosses never get what they deserve. So many secrets they know you had. Crying shame if you let the cat out of the bag. Stalked, harassed, your phone rings at night. Family serenity now broken with fright. Nowhere to turn, no one to trust. Wishing you could turn back your unquenchable lust. A traitor's life is but a vapor. Tomorrow they will read about you in the paper. Men in dark coats approach and yell, a desperate move in an expensive hotel. Of you, it is said, from the balcony fell. Who would have thought you would have killed yourself? When you work for the deep state year over year, betraying the principles in which you were reared, just remember, when humanity you screw, when your usefulness is gone, you will be too. Wow, and I think is poignant. I think that should be a warning to everyone who works in the deep state, who works in these intelligence agencies, right, who pull off these stunts. Thieves That's absolutely right. When your usefulness is done, you can't rest upon your laurels. I'm looking at you, Ghislaine Maxwell. You better be careful, because you know a lot. And all the people like that have done so many things that have furthered the agenda, you've got to watch out, because they don't. I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody. If you've committed crimes, I want you to be held accountable for your crimes. But I'm just telling you that they don't have any honor, and you think you're going to profit from what you do, you just better watch out, because they are not honorable. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was the victim or jumped out of a... How tall was the building?
You know, I didn't get down into the weeds of it, and I'm not even saying the guy was murdered. Maybe he was depressed. Maybe he fell. I don't know. There
have been a lot of people that have been pushed off the balconies of buildings.
Yes.
That's got to be a signature. I think it is a signature, but by whom, I don't know.
Well, it just seems like, you know, small aircraft, hot tubs, swimming pools, you know.
Tall buildings.
Tall buildings. Just, you know, people... what I posted on Gab is I said, a word of caution to all the intelligence operatives out there who might implement nefarious agendas. You may think you'll be handsomely rewarded for your treacherous activities, treason, deep state propaganda, and high crimes against mankind, but when your usefulness has gone to the establishment to which you sold your soul, there's always a danger that you might, quote-unquote, commit suicide, despite the fact that you think your life is going well and you have everything to live for. Or you might get clumsy and fall off a balcony, drown in a hot tub, crash in a small jet, run into a tree on a ski slope, or even shoot yourself in the head multiple times after beating yourself up. Of course, it's not like
funny, but
of course it's not like every job doesn't have its hazards.
Right.
So anyway, so that's you know, and again, I'm not saying the guy was murdered. It just kind of smells a little rotten in Denmark. Anyway.
Yeah, what surprised me about the story was that he was British. I didn't know that the founder of the White Helmets was British.
Yeah, it's a
British Army officer.
It's a joint U.S. State Department and British, I think, MI6 operation, and of course they've engineered a lot of propagandistic stuff. You know, we talked a lot of, you know, but the whole idea, you know, in fact, the engineering of the last bombing. The U.S. bombing of the Syrian war. We talked a lot about how they came in and staged that whole event where they were being hosed down. People were being hosed down, and the whole thing was supposed to be a Bashar al-Assad attack against the people. You know, the chlorine attack, and these... We covered recently on the show how the OPCW report ended up falling apart because these whistleblowers, real whistleblowers, came forward and exposed the fact that the report, key elements from the engineers on the ground were left out of the report.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, they need these theatrical events to get more money at budget time.
Yeah.
They've got to have justification for their existence.
Well, it's not only just about the money, it's also about the agenda. Because in this case, Trump had announced that he wanted to pull the troops out of Syria. He was trying to keep his campaign promise. And this is why, for all the things that I just pull my hair out about Trump and the things that he does, one thing that's clear is he tries at times to pull back. I think he plays along with the agenda to a certain point. There's no question about that. But then at times he also wants, I think, to appear like he's a hero, and he tries to be the consummate politician, and so he tries to actually do some things that the base really wants him to do. And so this is one thing that he campaigned on, that he was going to try to get us out of some of these wars. And anytime you go against the war agenda, why the intelligentsia tries to destroy you. And I think that that's what they're doing now. They're trying to destroy him. You got people inside his administration right now that are working very diligently, and they have since day one, really even before day one, to try to sabotage everything he does. I don't know if you've been following, Nikki Haley, who I do not like at all, but she does have a book out. You know, the former UN ambassador under Trump. She's been making the talk show rounds. One of her allegations is that she was approached by other members of Trump's own team and urged to help undermine his agenda. This is a report on her claims by CBS News.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says other Trump cabinet members tried to recruit her in an effort to resist the president's actions. In an interview for Sunday Morning with CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell, Haley accused former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, in her words, of undermining the president. Weisha Zhang is here in Studio 57 with more on this story. Weisha, good morning to you. What else is Nikki Haley saying?
Well, good morning. Nikki Haley told CBS News those former Trump aides should have quit if they didn't like the president's actions, and said their attempts to circumvent him go against the Constitution. And this isn't the first time we're hearing of staffers' attempts to go around President Trump.
To undermine a president is really a very dangerous thing.
Speaking to Norah O'Donnell on Sunday Morning, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley doubled down on claims that senior White House officials asked her to subvert President Trump. Haley writes in a book out this week that then Chief of Staff John Kelly and then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, quote, confided in me that when they resisted the president, they weren't being insubordinate. They were trying to save the country.
The Secretary of State Tillerson went on to tell you the reason he resisted the president's decisions was because if he didn't, people would die. Do you memorialize that conversation? It definitely happened?
It absolutely happened. And instead of saying that to me, they should have been saying that to the president, not asking me to join them on their sidebar plan.
In an interview with CBS News political contributor Bob Schieffer last December, Tillerson said he had openly challenged the commander-in-chief's decision-making.
And I'd have to say to him, well, Mr. President, I understand what you want to do, but you can't do it that way. It violates the law. It violates a treaty.
Responding to Haley, Kelly told Sunday Morning if by resistance and stalling she means putting a staff process in place to ensure the president knew all the pros and cons of what policy decision he might be contemplating, then guilty as charged. It seems those weren't the only attempts to temper President Trump's impulses. A purported senior Trump official wrote in an anonymous New York Times column last September that top staffers are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations.
An anonymous editorial, can you believe it? Anonymous, meaning gutless.
Speaking at a summit in Georgia last month, Kelly said he had second thoughts about leaving the administration and added that he told the president there would be consequences for surrounding himself with yes men.
Don't hire someone that will just, nod and say, that's a great idea, Mr. President, because you will be impeached.
President Trump claims General Kelly never said anything like his warning about impeachment, and if he had, quote, I would have thrown him out of office. In relation to those Haley comments, the White House and Tillerson have not responded to our requests for comment.
What do you think of that?
Well, it's most interesting, and I can kind of understand why the whole thing, because the United States has been participating in the building of the international system for global governance. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the activities of the CIA and the State Department are oriented towards those objectives. But those objectives will destroy our country.
Yes, and anybody who's really a patriotic American that understands what you just said is going to fight back against it.
Right. And if people die, so be it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's get it all out in the open and let's discuss the real issues, and then we'll go to battle if necessary.
Yeah.
Once everybody understands what the issues really are. But as long as we have all this kabuki theater or whatever it is that's going on in Washington, D.C., it's too complex for most people to understand, because you have to spend a lot of time looking at it and you have to understand some of the history, and it's just too much, Yeah. You almost have to have a degree in international relations and government and everything to understand it. I mean, I just hang on by my bare fingernails, trying to keep up with all of it.
It's absolutely nuts. And then just yesterday, the verdict came down against Trump advisor Roger Stone I don't know if you saw that or not, but they got him guilty on all counts.
Former advisor to the U.S. President Roger Stone has been found guilty of 7 offenses, including lying to Congress and witness tampering. Stone was charged earlier this year during the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Let's cross now to Patty Culhane in Washington for us. So, Patty, what more are we hearing on this?
Well, the jury has just come back. They didn't deliberate for very long, just about 7 hours over 2 days. So now we know Roger Stone, the self-labeled dirty trickster of politics, is facing some time in prison. As you mentioned, guilty on all 7 counts that he was charged on. That included obstructing an official investigation, obstructing justice, lying to Congress, which is a crime. So the bottom line here is the connection between WikiLeaks and those hacked Democratic emails. Now, Roger Stone publicly would go on Twitter before they were released and say something's coming. But then when he was asked about it in Congress as part of their ongoing investigation into Russian interference into the U.S. election, he basically said, wasn't me. It was coincidence. I was looking at public statements, didn't have any emails, didn't have any phone calls, didn't talk to the campaign, wasn't me. So then because of the Robert Mueller investigation, the special counsel, he was brought up on charges, these 7 charges, because they actually produced text messages, emails, phone calls, witnesses who said, yes, that was in fact Roger Stone. He was trying to be the go-between between WikiLeaks and the campaign. And one testified that he even directly told the president, who was then a candidate, that WikiLeaks was about to do these dumps. So,
okay, let me stop it right there because we got the break. There's a little bit more to that report, and then we'll get to the impeachment stuff. But I just want to say about this alleged evidence, I would have to see the evidence, but my understanding is that Roger was just like everybody else. He knew something was coming because everybody knew something was coming. But what's the evidence? And witnesses lie all the time. Roger Stone's big crime was that he was supporting Trump, and the Mueller investigation was trying his best to take down all of the people who are orbiting around Trump. Anyway, we got the bottom of the hour break. We'll continue in just a moment. This is Govern America.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're back. This is Govern America. The website for the show is governamerica.com. That's governamerica.com. And Vicky, go ahead and give your information out, please.
My website is thetechnocratictyranny.com. And I have an older website, channelingreality.com, and the link to that is at thetechnocratictyranny.com. So.
All right, yeah, when we're talking about the conviction, I guess, of Roger Stone, Trump's aide, yesterday, and I got a little bit more of this report, and we'll comment on it.
What now? Well, he's facing some pretty serious time in prison, potentially up to 50 years in prison. But that said, they'll go through federal guidelines, and there's all sorts of line items that they go through. He's not been convicted before. It wasn't a violent crime, so he's probably facing a lot less time than that. This is Roger Stone, and this is a man who basically thought that he likes to think of himself as being able to talk his way out of things, but he didn't really put on much of a defense. A lot of legal analysts were wondering what exactly the strategy was. He didn't try to defend himself on the stand. His lawyers basically played some of his testimony, and that was basically it. So his strategy of saying little didn't work. Now he's probably hoping that the president, his old friend, will give him a pardon.
How significantly does this affect President Trump?
Well, it very much significantly impacts him. Not necessarily that he's going to be brought up in charges for any of the having ties to this, because again, as we know, the Justice Department has a long-standing rule that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted for a crime. But the question is, if he doesn't pardon him, does that send a broader signal to all of the people who are now in the focus of Congress, the Rudy Giuliani's of the world, who may actually decide, you know what, it's probably time for me to testify. So far, they've basically been stonewalling Congress, saying, yeah, no, I'm not going to talk to you. If he doesn't step in and help Stone avoid what could be some serious prison time, that would send the message to all of these people in his orbit that he won't be there for them if they get into trouble.
Okay, that was a report from Al Jazeera. And I think Trump will probably pardon him. I don't think there's.
I don't see how he can. I
politically,
just don't. Maybe as he's leaving office, if he gets reelected, and at the end of his second term, maybe, if he isn't already out of jail. But I don't see how he can pardon him immediately.
Why wouldn't he?
Because of the political fallout. Although it might provide a major distraction.
See, I think
while something else is going on. If it does happen, if he does do that, then make sure and watch what else is happening, because it'll be something big.
Yeah, the political fallout, I agree with you. They would make a big deal out of it, but they make a big deal out of everything he does, no matter how minute it is. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's true. But some of it has, most of it really is rather empty.
Yes,
but
exactly.
But they would have something substantial with this,
I don't know.
With Roger Stone.
See, I don't know, because I don't think they have. Honestly, I don't think they have. And the reason I rang the bell during that, she said something about how they didn't put on much of a defense. I thought that was really interesting, because
I do too, and that's part of my thinking. Because
are they relying upon the fact that Trump can pardon him, and so are they counting on? Is his legal team counting on the notion that Trump will pardon Roger Stone? Or
remember, Roger Stone is a dirty trickster. I mean, he has a career going way back.
Mm-hmm.
To even before Ronald Reagan was elected to office. Okay, so Roger Stone is a political animal.
Right.
And has been his whole entire life.
But still, there are some things. So
he may be taking one for the team,
Well, that's kind of interesting. I can't imagine going to prison for anybody. Prison is not a good place, and they may not put him in with, chainsaw murderers and things like that. But you never know. I mean, I could see. Well, I think they probably would, if they're genuinely against him. I could imagine them putting him in with the worst of the offenders.
Well, yeah, and there's been speculation that he might be Epsteined in prison. That's a possibility, but if you take the entire political environment, legal and political environment in the United States, and you understand what the stakes are. Now, the team that Roger Stone has been affiliated with throughout his entire lifetime, they have a political point of view, and it's part of the free trade. The whole Karl Rove, I consider that agenda, after I figured out what they were doing, the agenda is globalization.
Mm-hmm.
And globalization is the end of the United States as a nation state. So if you're involved in something that big, you'd have to make a life commitment. I'm putting my life on the line for this belief. And so if he goes to prison for a couple of years, that may be a sacrifice that he's making for his belief. People do that sort of thing. It's hard to believe in this day and age when nearly everybody sells out for money. It's hard to believe that people would adhere to a principle and a belief, but people do that.
Yeah, exactly.
More people outside of our country than inside of our country. Our country is basically just, it's commercial territory, and everybody is for sale just about.
By the way, your sound up on your TV is.
Okay, hold on. I'll go turn it on.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with it, but the point is that it's another thing that we got to look at and watch. I want to get to the impeachment hearings now, since time is moving by quickly. And
okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry,
I was kind of stalling a little bit.
Shrill DACA people, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, the impeachment hearings, after 45 minutes. Now, this is the thing. This whole thing has become so ridiculous. I mean, first of all, before this thing ever started, they were holding secret meetings in the basement of the Capitol, where the Republicans weren't even allowed to participate. And the question you got to ask yourself, if the whole process was honest, why would they have to hold secret meetings anywhere? And by the way, Vicky, once again, I got to say, Eric Ciaramella. Since we're not supposed to say the name, Eric Ciaramella, let's keep saying that.
I'll say it too.
Let's keep saying the name Eric Ciaramella. I mean, it's ridiculous. What's his face? Schiff, Adam Schiff, got up there and said that he had no idea who the supposed whistleblower was, and why are they calling him a whistleblower in the first place when clearly he's a leaker? Because there are legal consequences for being a leaker. But anyway, I'm not saying Eric Ciaramella is the leaker, but that seems to be what a lot of people say and are believing. And why would, when we mention the name Eric Ciaramella on social media, why would our accounts be deleted? As many people have found that to be the case. Yeah. So, anyway, here we are. And after 45 minutes of the Democrats questioning their witnesses, allowing them to make their cases on Wednesday, the Republican counsel, Steve Castor is his name, he began questioning the witnesses, only to be interrupted by Adam Schiff, the chairman, who unilaterally changed the rules of the whole thing. They put out House Resolution 660, setting the rules for the hearing, and then midstream, he interrupts the Republican counsel and changes the rules.
But from the president's perspective, if the ambassador, Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, one of the most influential diplomats, is penning an op-ed, certainly with the okay of President Poroshenko, the DNC consultants are conferring with Ukrainian officials at the embassy. Former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk is saying things on social media. Interior Minister Avakov, who has spanned both the Poroshenko and the Zelensky realm, is also saying some very unkind things on social media about the president. You certainly can appreciate that President Trump was very concerned that some elements of the Ukrainian establishment were not in favor of him, did not support him, and were out to get him.
If I go to, and I'll allow the question, but
that's Adam Schiff.
Are you asking?
Parliamentary inquiry? Are you seriously interrupting our time here?
I will allow the question. I won't dock this from the time. I just want to be clear, Ambassador. If you're able to verify the things that Counsel has asked you in the prerequisite of the question, that's fine. Otherwise, in questions from the majority or the minority that may assume facts not in evidence before you, you should be cautioned about that.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
The time is with with Minority Counsel.
Mr. Ratcliffe.
Chairman, I sat here through the first 45 minutes and literally had an objection to almost the foundation of every question that Mr. Goldman asked regarding facts not in evidence, leading. But House Resolution 660 does not say that we are under the federal rules of evidence. If it is your position that I should be asserting objections to questions that violate the federal rules of evidence, let me know now, because this hearing is going to change significantly.
As I said, Mr. Ratcliffe, I will allow the question.
I think the gentleman has a different question about the rules. So what are the rules that are going to govern this?
Does the ranking member seek recognition?
I'm asking. I'm yielding you to the question I just asked you.
For what purpose do you seek recognition?
To answer Mr. Ratcliffe's question.
I have answered it. May I resume your question?
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, you haven't answered my question whether or not I should be assumes facts not in evidence or leading objections to questions that are posed from this point forward. That's my question.
Mr. Ratcliffe, I'll say once again, I'm not objecting to the question, but I am instructing the witness that they should not presume questions from the majority or the minority that may represent facts, not evidence, are correct. I have answered the question. We will resume the questioning and resume the clock.
So he's witness tampering, and he's making the rules up as he goes along. Mm-hmm. I mean, if anybody can, I mean, this is such a charade. It is unbelievable.
Yeah, when I was listening to it earlier, I was thinking that if I were a professor of media studies, I would study these hearings and dissect them, produce case studies in propaganda, because the techniques that they've used, they're really very clever, the Democrats, in how they misrepresent and how they use language and timing.
Language.
Mm-hmm. When they're investigating a prior wrong, then they do a switch, as if they're talking about a future wrong in a hypothetical context.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like they switch the time in mid-sentence from what they're talking about. We're talking about one thing in one phrase and then something different in another phrase, moving to a hypothetical. You know, do you believe it's okay to break the law kind of deal, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know they are attorneys, and attorneys are real good wordsmiths. They're very good at their craft, and these are the top of the line in terms of attorneys and wordsmiths. But how clever are they? I mean, let's look at the latest Rasmussen poll, which has the on the RasmussenReports.com website, where they have the polls. The Rasmussen Reports daily presidential tracking poll for Friday shows that 50% of likely U.S. voters approve of Donald Trump's job performance, 49% disapprove. The latest figures include 37% who strongly approve of the job Trump is doing and 42% who strongly disapprove. The point of the matter is his approval rating has risen 4 points to 50%, which, you know, doesn't sound like a lot, but when you got the country divided in the way they are, I mean, his approval rating is going up since these impeachment hearings have started. So this thing is backfiring on them. At least that's the way it appears. Because the people are smart enough.
Is it backfiring, or is it doing exactly what it's supposed to do? Whose side is Trump really on? It's hard to say.
And I understand the cynicism. I genuinely believe that this is a deep state coup d'etat, and it's not even really. I mean, the Democrats are tools. The Republicans are too, but the corruption is concentrated big time in the Democratic Party. They have election tampering on their hands. They overthrew Ukraine. They were the ones, Alexandra Chalupa being chief among them, but Victoria Nuland, all of them, they used Ukraine as a springboard to meddle in the 2016 election. They were looking to uncover dirt. The James Comey, his FBI, I mentioned this before, they had an office, and I believe they still do to this day, at the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NABU, where they put out information that was damning to Paul Manafort just prior to the 2016 election, causing him to resign. There were unsubstantiated allegations that were put out by Paul, about Paul Manafort, and he decided that it was going to be too damaging to the campaign, so he resigned his post. I mean, all of this chaos right before the 2016 election. So they're guilty of the very thing that they, and of course we know about, the whole Biden thing, and the corruption of the leader of Burisma, which unfortunately I didn't clip the audio because I was afraid of having too much audio from the impeachment because I didn't want to just be focusing exclusively on that. But I mean, there's a lot to be. I genuinely believe what they're doing here is they're trying to take this guy out in any way they can. And the thing that I'm concerned about is if he gets elected, how are they going to, the desperation will be there to try to take him out. Look, they can't control him. He's a loose cannon.
Yes.
And that's what they don't like about it. I know I sound like I'm defending him, and I guess I am.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of things I don't like.
Myself. I mean,
I
that's
don't
the part
like
of him
Donald
that I
Trump.
do like.
I'm not a Trumper. I'm not a fan. Okay? There's a lot of things. He's thrown us under the bus as far as gun control is concerned. He's thrown us under the bus as far as NAFTA is concerned.
Health care and education.
USMCA. I mean, there's a lot of things that are really deplorable about Donald Trump. And so there's really no reason to reelect the guy, except for the fact that he's got a little bit of this ego enough to say, you know what, screw these guys. I'm the president, and I'm going to do it this way. He's not a good order follower. And consequently, that's what they can't handle it. And when he made this phone call to Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and he mentioned possibly investigating some of these things that have been going on in Ukraine, they flipped out. And so Mueller Report 2.0 had to commence because they had to get rid of him. They couldn't handle it.
Right. It just happens to be that one article that I wrote that I published on October 20th, I think is really important background on what is called the new transatlantic agenda. Mm-hmm. And it was agreed upon, an agreement between the EU, the European Community, and the United States. And it outlines the cooperation between the EC, EU, and the United States. And I think that this agenda, if you read the U.S.-EU joint action plan, you'll see what they've been working on. It includes redoing the justice systems of countries, guaranteeing free and fair elections, and all of that stuff. It's all documented in the new transatlantic agenda. Hmm. And if anybody's interested, just go to my website and look for that. It's right in the feature box, but it has important background to what's going on in the Ukraine and what has been going on.
Yeah, very important to focus on Ukraine because it's the center of so many things, including this whole anti-Russian thing.
Well, they're redesigning governments. That's what they're doing.
Yes, and
they're using NGOs to do it.
Yeah, and we have coup d'etats going on by the CIA all over the world. I mean, just look at Bolivia. Here's another one. But you could name off a number of things. They're trying Venezuela, and so many different things around the world that are being overthrown right now because these, whether and do we say that we like the people that we don't think that the CIA should be overthrowing? No. Many of these are socialist leaders, socialist governments, but what
that's
not the point.
What we're trying to replace them with is a global,
equally as bad or worse
system. I mean, so we're not doing those people any favors.
If Kim Jong-un doesn't play along with the globalist agenda, the globalists will try to overthrow Kim Jong-un. Now, when we say that the globalists shouldn't do that, are we defending Kim Jong-un? I don't think so.
No.
I'm not a fan of Kim Jong-un, but I'm not a fan of overthrowing every government that the United States disagrees with. And there's the dilemma. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but I think Donald Trump was duly elected by the American people, and he should be able to serve out his term without being interfered with and without having to deal with a Mueller investigation that never ends. And then when it does end, we have Mueller investigation part 2 kicking up. I mean, this is ridiculous what these people are doing. But this
deep state globalists.
This is what
I do want to tell everybody, if you just pick one country and look at what kind of turnkey system they're trying to drop into place as a governing system, which I think you can see you can kind of see through the new transatlantic agenda, and just understand it's turnkey, and they've been replicating it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so, they're doing the same thing. And so it's the same battle within every country between nationalists and globalists that are trying to take over their government and change their culture, their legal systems, their customs and traditions.
Yeah.
So I don't think our country is doing the right thing at all.
Yeah, I see the caller on the line. Just hang with me just a moment. I want to get through a couple of these things of audio here real quick, and then I'll take you. We have Republican counsel questioning U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. This is what you were talking about before, Vicky, on what the ambassador described as an unofficial or irregular channel of communication with Ukraine.
Now, Ambassador Taylor, I want to turn to the discussion of the Irregular Channel. Okay, we have Ambassador Volker, who's a former Senate-confirmed ambassador to NATO, long-time State Department diplomat, and you've known Ambassador Volker for years, correct?
That's correct.
A man of unquestioned integrity, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Since we're so close to the break, I'll just play that after the break, and because I don't want to step on that. I think this is very important. What they're talking about here is he has a problem. This William Taylor ambassador guy that's testifying, the Democrats' witness against Trump, because he didn't like the fact that there had been what he calls an irregular channel of communication that had been created with the people of Ukraine. And so he's going to talk about how he had very concerns because this irregular channel deviated from what the regular channel was trying to accomplish. Gee, can you say trying to establish real... The problem is what you have here is the deep state is trying to control foreign policy. That's the bottom line. They think that they run the country, and you know what? They're right. They do run it. They have run it. And the big problem they have right now is they got a guy in there that thinks he thinks he can run it, and that's what this is all about. This is a power struggle. This is a battle for control of the United States that's unfolding before the people's eyes. We'll take the break. We'll be back in a moment.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
And we're back here, hour number 2, as it continues to be the 16th of November, 2019, here on Govern America, talking about the impeachment hearings, this charade that has been happening this past week. GovernAmerica.com is the website. That's GovernAmerica.com and TheTechnocraticTyranny.com. Make sure you get the in there in order to get to Vicky's website. And we're talking about this coup d'etat that's been happening in our country right now. And that is exactly what it is. I can't really think of anything more important to talk about because we are watching literally the overthrow of our government. I want people to think about this. This isn't about Donald Trump, people. This really isn't about Donald Trump.
It would be happening to anybody that had been elected.
And you Democrats out there that are so engrossed in Trump dementia, anti-Trump dementia. You've been programmed by the media to hate this guy. You really better stop and think about your position. Because when your guy or gal gets in there, if they don't go along, they're going to have this same type of thing happen to them. Because you can't... The whole point of all of this, and it's been going on a long time. I mean, you go back to JFK. He established secret channels to the Soviet Union. There were letters that were going by outside of the normal channels prior to JFK's death. I've got a book of them sitting over there, of the letters that were written back and forth.
You know what it is? We have too many. The UN system with NGOs and the concept of regionalism is contrary to the organization of the political organization of countries of the world. Mm-hmm. And so you've got all these NGOs, and you have the NGOs are acting in the political arena opposing national governments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like you have a house divided against itself. And you can't, nobody can manage an organization that is fighting for supremacy within itself.
Yeah,
it can't work. It just simply cannot work.
But these people are guilty of nothing short of treason. That's what's going on here. I mean, you're seeing everything be hijacked. And what's bad about it is they've managed to successfully divide the nation to the point where half the country is cheering it on.
Yeah, cheering on the end of our nation state.
That's exactly right.
And how they think that they're going to have rights, or and the thing is that they will quote the Constitution and say you have rights, but if our country's organizational structure is torn down, we're at square zero. We are starting over. You have nothing.
Yeah.
You are at the mercy of the oligarchs.
So I want to get back to this hearing real quick before I talk us out of time, and I know the caller's still holding on. Again, Republican counsel asking U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, the Democrats' witness, William Taylor, on about this irregular channel of communication with Ukraine.
That's correct.
And somebody with incredible knowledge of the region.
With very good knowledge of the region. Yes,
and the best interest of the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right.
And the best interest of Ukraine.
His first priority is clearly the United States.
Okay.
And to the extent that Ukraine has an implication for that, yes.
Okay.
Ukraine as well.
And the second member of the Irregular Channel is Ambassador Sondland, who is Senate confirmed, ambassador to the EU. So his involvement here, while not necessarily part of his official duties as the ambassador to the EU, certainly is not outlandish for him to be interested and engaged pursuant to the President or Secretary Pompeo's direction. Correct?
It's a little unusual for the U.S. ambassador to the EU to play a role in Ukraine policy.
Okay. And, you know, it might be irregular, but it's certainly not outlandish. And then Secretary Perry is the third member of the Irregular Channel. Certainly a, Senate-confirmed official, somebody with deep experience in energy markets, and he was pursuing some, liquefied natural gas projects in Ukraine.
That's correct, Ms. Kessler.
So his involvement, Secretary Perry's involvement, is perfectly acceptable?
It is.
Okay. Now, this irregular channel as it developed, when did you determine that it became problematic?
I was concerned when the irregular channel appeared to be going against the irregular channel was going against the overall direction of and purpose of the regular channel.
Okay. So that's when he has a problem with it. As long as the irregular channel is accomplishing the same goals as the regular channel, everything's fine. But it's when this irregular channel starts to deviate, and I would assert, I don't know what we're really talking about here with this irregular channel, but if the president learns that the normal regular channel is not doing what the foreign policy goals are of his administration, he might set up an irregular channel to accomplish, or one of his subordinates might set up an irregular channel to accomplish his foreign policy objectives. But as we move on here, we'll find that these so-called diplomats seem to think that they're the ones running the show. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, I was going to say, the issue is gas pipelines, natural gas. Mm-hmm. And that's why Rick Perry is involved. And the ambassador to the EU, if you look at NATO, two of these divisions of NATO have to do with
pipelines.
One of the geopolitical issues is that they don't want, the State Department and our government policy was that they did not want Europe to be connected with Russian gas, with Russian pipelines.
Well,
they don't want Western Europe to be dependent on Putin for energy.
That being the case, though, it seems like everything they're doing is contrary to the goals. I mean, Putin is forming a lot of partnerships right now with a lot of different countries because they're trying to they realized that they can't rely upon the United States.
Yeah, I don't think the United States is a reliable partner in anything because we have this schizophrenic foreign policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Deep state policy, and then we have the public policy, and they're different. And so, who can rely on that?
Yeah, you can't.
Now, Mr. Ambassador Taylor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What'd you say?
Oh, I was just going to say you don't know who you're talking to. You know what side they're on. So.
Yeah, exactly. And continuing on here.
Now, Mr.
This is later on in the hearing. They circled back to this irregular channel.
Now, Mr. Ambassador Taylor, you testified that there are two channels, a regular and irregular. What did you see as Rudy Giuliani's role in Ukraine policy?
Congresswoman, I came to see that Mr. Giuliani had a large influence on the irregular channel.
And was that normal? Is that normal to have a private citizen of the United States take an active role in diplomacy?
It is not normal. It is not unusual to ask for people outside the government to give opinions to help form the policies of the U.S. government. It is unusual to have a person put input into the channel that goes contrary to U.S. policy.
Okay, contrary to U.S. policy. And again, who sets U.S. policy? That's the question. Because if there's a channel going, and if this guy had some concerns, then why didn't he take those up with the president?
Yeah.
Think back to what we were talking about earlier with Nikki Haley.
With the government at that level, it's protocol. he would have to go through the chief of staff to get an appointment with the president. And who's the chief of staff? Apparently, Mick Mulvaney. And Mick Mulvaney is one of the informal channels of what's going on in the Ukraine. So there is no independent person, for within the government to go to, given the formal and the informal policy, since the informal policy is apparently coming from the White House.
Mm-hmm. All right, later on, he again is questioned and reiterates his belief that the communications channels should be in line with foreign policy goals. But again, whose goals? Foreign policy is set by the president. And any channel of communication he sets up to further those goals, I would assert are not improper.
What is the risk of running a separate channel of diplomacy that is completely outside of normal channels and does not further U.S. policy goals, Ambassador Taylor?
It's possible to do one, but not the other. That is, if it's completely against U.S. policy goals, then that's a mistake. Then it's not helpful. You can get advice and even have conversations outside of the normal channels, but then they need to be part of U.S. foreign policy and approaching those goals.
Okay, so
what's disturbing to me is that both Rick Perry and Rudy Giuliani were involved with the Trans-Texas corridor in some way. Mm-hmm. And the Trans-Texas corridor, the design of it, of course, included pipelines. It's like I said, there is a turnkey model of everything that's going on. And the turnkey model is around transportation hubs and corridors, and the corridors include natural gas pipelines, fiber optic cable, electricity, everything that runs in a straight line that you can run down a corridor. And so you've got, a turnkey with the connections all being everything that travels down the corridor in a straight line to another turnkey location.
Yeah.
And Rudy Giuliani, when the whole Trans-Texas corridor thing was going on, he was advocating for the Spanish firm Centra, as I recall.
Yeah. Was it?
Which
I guess I didn't realize Rudy Giuliani was advocating for that.
Yeah. I was really disappointed.
Well, I don't trust that guy as far as I can throw him. I mean, I really don't. Trump seems to trust him, but Trump seems to trust a lot of people that Trump shouldn't be trusting, including John Bolton, who I think Steve Bannon had a lot to do with Bolton being in there, because Steve Bannon, I mentioned before, when he was at Breitbart, required hosts of the Breitbart radio program to have Bannon on, or have John Bolton on a weekly basis, on a regular basis. So I'm sure Sheldon Adelson probably had a lot to do with Bolton being in there, because he and Bolton are tight, but also Steve Bannon is not who people think he is, in my opinion. So anyway, I want to get to the phone call. I think this is John in Tennessee on the line, and then I have more audio from the impeachment hearing, and I still would like to get to that New America stuff that we were going to talk about last week. So hello, John. You're on the air.
Hello, Darren. Hi, Vicky.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to hear you both. Vicky, you said something probably 30, 45 minutes ago, and I had already been thinking this. And I think what you said was, or is it going exactly as planned? Well, what had come to my mind when you all first came on at 10 o'clock was a book by Machiavelli called The Prince, where, if you're familiar with the book, he creates his own enemies and his own problems so that he can quash them, squash them, and become the victor and the hero. And I see Donald Trump as the prince. I really do. I'm like you, Vicky. I don't trust the guy as far as I could spit him.
Well, I don't trust him either.
Is he better than the alternative? Absolutely. Darren and I were talking yesterday. You know, he wants to go, and I likened it for years to a conductor on a train or a driver on a bus. They want to go to the same place. The Democrats figure we're 3 weeks late and we need to get there right now. They want to drive the bus over the cliff, bring about the New World Order, bring about Agenda 2030 and 2019. They want everything on the fast track. The Republicans, they want to go over the cliff too, but they want you to enjoy the ride. So we're going to go see the Grand Canyon, and we're going to Cody, Wyoming, and we're going to go look at Denali. We're going to have a nice trip before we run you over the cliff. If you're going to have fun, folks, get on the bus.
You know what? You're exactly right. I totally agree with you on what you're saying. And I've thought that.
Hang on, John. Hang on a second.
They love us.
Can you hear Vicky?
Yeah, I hear. I
know you can hear. I'm talking about Vicky. Or can John hear Vicky?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead, Vicky.
Yes, I can. Go ahead, Vicky.
Oh, I was going to say, I just totally agree with what you're saying. I have thought many times that the things that Trump is doing, because he'll say one thing and then he does the other, and when it seems like that he is doing things that appeal to the Republican base, what he actually ends up doing is for the Democrats. And so it's really confusing. It's a whole confusing scenario, but that's kind of what I see too.
Well, I'll tell you what I see. Well, here's why I believe that he's not a part of their intelligence establishment and that they want him gone. There are numerous clues that you can get. I've referred often. I wrote the article, Doom of Danger, Is the Deep State, is Donald Trump growing weary of deep state dictation? I've mentioned that a number of times, where they have come out, and by they I mean people inside the administration, talking about how difficult it is to try to control what he does. And I mean, they're overt about it. I mean, are this all about a big charade? Are they all just acting? I don't think so. This Nikki Haley announcement, where she was approached about, how can we undermine what he's trying to do? I don't think all these people are coming out lying about this stuff. So there's a genuine.
I don't either, Darren. That isn't the way I see it working.
Yeah.
Not everybody has to be in on the joke.
No, I don't think it's a joke. See, this is the thing. Just because it's difficult to describe, but just because he is not doing exactly what we want him to do in terms of the Constitution does not mean that the deep state or the permanent state or the intelligence establishment or the shadow government or whatever vernacular you want to use to describe it, but this secret government that we have running parallel to our real government, that's really running the show here. That doesn't mean that they're happy with what he's doing, and that doesn't mean that they don't want somebody in there that's genuinely a part of what the problem is. Trump has tried numerous times to, for instance, pull the troops out of Syria. And every single time a false flag event happens, and all of a sudden it's like, well, politically it's very difficult. The last time, he's just trying to move some troops out of harm's way because he knows Erdogan is going to go in and attack. And he's like, well, this is going to happen, so we might as well move the troops out of the way. They flip out. I mean...
But see, Darren, you said something earlier, and it was, is Trump growing tired of the deep state
dictation? Yes.
Dictation. And so what if, Darren, and I said this yesterday when we were speaking in private, Trump is nobody's fool. He's a very smart man. So what if he is really living out Machiavelli's book, The Prince. And they're tired of Trump because Trump is refusing the deep state dictation, but he is literally dictating to the deep state dictators. So,
well, you're losing me now.
He's a deal maker. He says he's well, I hope not. But if he is actually, if you've never read The Prince, you need to read The Prince.
I don't think the deep state is going to be controlled by anybody, John. I think these people, the way it ought to be is that he does dictate to them. They are supposed to be serving at the pleasure of the president. But that's not the way this is going on.
I understand that, but if the president's pleasure is to lead, and this is deep, and I know, hey, I'm a conspiracy nut, and I'm super cynical because I've been lied to all my life. But if he is playing a game, and he wants the general public to believe that he's out for the good of the nation, to make America great again, and then look up MAGA, and look up the etymology of the word MAGA, and it actually reverts to magic. So, he's not the first one to use the term MAGA. They have those initials. It's MAGA.
Well, I don't know who actually did the abbreviation.
The wordsmith? What is it? Okay, who did?
But let's keep the conversation on a plane where we don't have to conjecture. I mean, a certain amount of this is conjecture anyway. But I mean, the point is that we can see certain things that have happened, and certain clues along the way about what's It's interesting to me that it seems like almost everybody that comes out of that administration turns around and has something bad to say about how it's being led.
But it's like Vicky said, is that he'll say one thing, and if anything gets accomplished, for the most part, it's something minute, and the wheels keep turning, and we keep going headed towards the cliff. So, is he slowing it down? Yeah, he's slowing it down, but he's not stopping it, and he's got a lot of opposition. I'll give you that. He's got people that are looking, I believe, to do him harm. He's got people, in the Democratic Party, in the so-called free press, which we know since the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act is a joke, that there is no such thing as fair and balanced anywhere except in your mind, in Vicky's mind, in my mind, and the minds of people that are actually willing to look at the truth. That's the only place you're going to find it. You're not going to find it on TV or radio or newspaper. You might find it on a web page. You might find it on a broadcast on the radio that's independent. And those people are called crackpots and kooks because they're speaking the truth. And the truth in a day of deceit is a revolutionary act.
Yeah, there's no question that the media is... What's going on today with the media definitely makes Operation Mockingbird look like a walk in the park. No question about it. I think, Vicky, you were going to say something?
Well, and it's...
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
And I talked too much already.
No, go ahead.
No.
Somebody better talk, because this is a talk show.
I was going to say... Okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Vicky, please.
Well, we're at a standstill here. We can't get people to talk.
I agree with John. I mean, Trump is a very smart man, and he is not actually a total political novice. He's followed the political scene at a depth that I think is far deeper than a lot of people because of his relationship with that attorney Cohn, who was involved with the Nixon impeachment.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump lives in New York City, which is where all of the financial stuff happens. And so Trump is not really a political novice. I mean, when I was in New York, he was on the TV being interviewed and stuff, And he had a lot of critics even back then. And if you look at his history, I mean, he built that skating rink. Supposedly, the city couldn't get it done, and Donald Trump steps in, and he's the hero. Now, how does that happen that an outsider can move the bureaucracy like that? It doesn't unless it's a facilitated kind of thing.
Well, I don't know. Money does a lot. Money does a lot.
He didn't have money back then.
He's not really
in New York
either, because if you remember how close a friend he was with JFK Jr., he was connected to the Kennedys. I mean...
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Going on that I'm not at liberty to say. Yeah, he was good friends with K. Jr. And there's some speculation, and I don't. You talk about speculation.
I don't want to get into too much speculation.
Some connection.
It would be interesting to
I've got some connections, and it would blow your mind. He's not an outsider. Never has been. You go back to his uncle. You go back to Tesla. He's very well connected.
I don't know why we're getting this popping on the line.
And he's playing his part.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll let you go, but...
Hey, appreciate the call, John.
I don't trust him.
Yeah, I don't trust him either. You know, it is what it is. Thanks for calling in. We'll go ahead and move on and take the bottom of the hour break, and we'll continue with some of the audio when we come back. Stay with us, folks. This is Govern America.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
And we're back. This is Govern America. GovernAmerica.com. That's GovernAmerica.com. That's the website for the show. And Vicky's website is thetechnocratictyranny.com, where you can get all of her research and information, and more going up all the time. One thing I guess we can say about this whole scenario is I think that we're never going to solve this situation. This, who is Donald Trump? Is he genuine or not? I think Trump is geared more toward big business, and I think that those goals are many times consistent with the technocratic tyranny, and it's consistent with globalization. And so in that regard, he is really an enemy to freedom in that regard. I do think that he is not a part of the intelligence establishment, however. So I think that's probably the lines during which this whole thing is kind of being drawn. But one thing's for clear, Vicky, clear to me, is that we're going to be debating this whole scenario and what it meant, what this administration meant for many, many years to come, long after Donald Trump is out of office.
I totally agree with you on that. And there is one thing about Trump, and I agree with everything that you said, but there is one thing about Trump, is that he is smart enough to understand that if you destroy your own country, you have destroyed your own economic base and political platform.
Yes.
And that seems to be something that the Democrats don't quite get.
Yeah, well, there's such a corrupt party, and there seems to be more of a concentration, at least in my mind, there seems to be much more of a concentration of deep state intelligence establishment corruption in the Democratic Party than there is in the Republican Party.
You know why? It's because it really started with when the Democrats were in power. In the 1960s, when they first started using trade agreements, what they called trade agreements, to build this harmonized global system, it was the Democrats that were in power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they were first at the trough, so to speak. And the Democrats, I think, are far more into process and procedures of governing than are the Republicans.
Yeah.
The Republicans represent corporations, basically.
Yeah.
And so, they are always trying to get rid of government, whereas the Democrats consider government to be a tool to facilitate their own agendas, which means taking advantage of the opportunities that they themselves create.
Yeah, when you say that the Republicans are trying to get rid of government, what I would suggest is that what the Republicans, that may have been true in the past, I think now what it really boils down to is the Republicans are trying to shift the responsibility of government from the public sector to the private sector. So here you have...
You're absolutely right about that. They are trying to establish a system whereby we are governed by corporations, essentially corporations and their foundations.
And this is what is meant by the term governance, because you have a system of control outside the normal government system, which is really unaccountable to the people, and really there's no way, it's not subject to the usual restraints that government is subject to.
That's exactly right. Using the economic and political power of corporations to do things
the dirty
that
work
government can't do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because of constitutional restraints.
Yeah. And of course they would be quick to add, oh, yeah, but we have oversight. We have oversight.
Yeah, they have nothing.
How has that worked out so well? Not very. All right, getting back to the hearings, to the evidence, the so-called evidence of the impeachment. The Democrats are, again, attempting to impeach Trump over his call to Ukraine President Zelensky, where Trump asked Zelensky to investigate corruption and help him find out what happened regarding Ukraine's role in meddling in the 2016 election. The Democrat claim is that Trump withheld military aid to Ukraine, leveraging a White House visit on condition that Zelensky, announce the investigation. Also claiming that they were claiming that there was a quid pro, basically, that Trump asked him to investigate Biden, and really, I think if Biden, again, he needed to be investigated. What's amazing about this whole situation is Biden admitted to doing the very thing that they're accusing Trump of doing. There was a quid pro quo with Biden and his son. Biden got the prosecutor fired who was looking into his son's activities at Burisma. Once again, Biden, in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. This is him bragging.
It just happened to be that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones. So I got Ukraine. And I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
So he got the prosecutor looking into Biden's son, Hunter Biden, fired. He used foreign aid, U.S. foreign aid, to get his own thing regarding his son dismissed or, dropped. Get the prosecutor fired. Now, how is that not an impeachable offense if what Trump is doing is an impeachable offense? But none of this ever even comes up, except to, it's like nobody even pays attention to it. It's unbelievable. So anyway, getting back to
it's also insane. It's really kind of hard to believe, There's no consistency At all.
Complete double standard. It is unbelievable. The double standard that exists here.
I think they're trying to create I think the intent was to create a constitutional crisis.
Well, I think that there's a very good chance that that's happening, and that will happen.
Because what they're doing with governments all over the world is harmonizing under a global system of governance, right? Mm-hmm. The intelligence community has already hooked up internationally. So they've kind of left the territory of the United States. The Department of Justice, of course, is critical. If you're going to have a global system of governance, you can't have a Justice Department within the nation-state context, because by definition, everything that anybody does under the global system that is contrary to a national law, you would have this fight. So the Justice Department itself has to be taken down and reconstituted under a global system. Yeah. All of the agencies of government have to be reconstituted under a global system of governance.
Yeah, and there's your real deep coup d'etat. The stuff that's happening with Trump is the surface coup, and then you have a deeper coup under that.
Right, and the way that the marketing package for it is security. That's the big word, security. And the new form of security since 1990 has been computer systems.
Yep, there it is. And that's exactly what they're using to control. All right, back to the hearing.
All right, let's move ahead to this July 25th call and between the presidents. Now, am I correct that neither of you were on this call? Is that right, Mr. Kent?
That's correct.
And you were neither as well? So you both read it after it was released publicly at the end of September?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there you go. Right off the bat, the witnesses are admitting that they were not on the call. The whole thing is centering around the call, and they admit right from the get-go that they weren't on the call. Everything that they read about, they heard about, So, here we go on with the hearing.
Ambassador Taylor, thank you for being here. AIDS held up on July 18th, is that right?
That's when I first heard about it, Mr.
And then it's released, Ambassador Taylor, on September 11th. And we know that from your deposition, in those 55 days that aid is delayed.
Okay, now this is Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan, I really like this guy. He's great because he really puts it all together. We're talking about what is the evidence? Where is the evidence at? And, you just heard a moment ago the star witnesses admit that they were not on the call. And so Jim Jordan puts this together and tries to drill down as to exactly where they're getting their information from.
You met with President Zelensky 3 times. The first one was July 26th, the day after the famous call now between President Trump and President Zelensky. President Zelensky meets with you, Ambassador Volker, and Ambassador Sondland. And again, according to your deposition and your testimony, there was no linkage of security assistance dollars to investigating Burisma or the Bidens. Second meeting is August 27th. Again, in this 55-day time frame, second meeting is August 27th. President Zelensky meets with you and Ambassador Bolton and others. And again, there's no linkage of dollars, security assistance dollars, to an investigation of the Bidens. Then, of course, the third meeting is September 5th. President Zelensky meets with you and Senators Johnson and Murphy. And once again, there was no linkage of security assistance dollars to an investigation of Burisma or the Bidens. 3 meetings with the president of Ukraine, the new president, and no linkage. 3 meetings face-to-face with President Zelensky, no linkage. Yet, in your deposition, you said this, and you said it again in the first hour of the majority. My clear understanding was security assistance money would not come until President Zelensky committed to pursue the investigation. My clear understanding was they weren't going to get the money until President Zelensky committed to pursue the investigations. Now, with all due respect, Ambassador, your clear understanding was obviously wrong, because it didn't happen. President Zelensky didn't announce he was going to investigate Burisma or the Bidens. He didn't do a press conference and say, I'm going to investigate the Bidens. We're going to investigate Burisma. He didn't tweet about it. And you just told the ranking member he didn't do the CNN interview and announce he's going to investigate Burisma or the Bidens. So 3 face-to-face meetings, it doesn't come up, no linkage whatsoever. President Zelensky doesn't announce it before the aid is released on the 11th. And yet you said you have a clear understanding that those 2 things were going to happen. The money was going to get released, but not until there was an investigation, and that, in fact, didn't happen. So what I'm wondering is, where did you get this clear understanding?
As I testified, Ms. Jordan, this came from Ambassador Sondland.
Well, can you hold 1 second, Ambassador? I'm going to bring you a piece of paper from Ambassador Sondland's statement.
Very good.
And you can take a look at this. Go ahead, though. I want to let you finish.
Ambassador Sondland also said that he talked to President Zelensky and Mr. Yermak and had told them that although this was not a quid pro quo, if President Zelensky did not clear things up in public, we would be at a stalemate. That was one point. It was also the case.
Mr. Morrison talked to you, right?
No. What I was going to say is Ambassador Sondland also told me that he recognized that it was a mistake to have told the Ukrainians that only the meeting with the president in the Oval Office was held up on the in order to get these investigations. No, it was not just the meeting; it was also the security system. That is, everything was. So those two discussions.
No, I understand.
Okay.
All right. So again, just to recap, you had 3 meetings with President Zelensky. No linkage in those 3 meetings came up. Ambassador Zelensky didn't announce that he was going to do any investigation of the Bidens or Burismas before the aid was released. He didn't do a tweet, didn't do anything on CNN, didn't do any of that. President Zelensky, excuse me.
Right.
And then what you have in front of you is an addendum that Mr. Sondland made to his testimony that we got a couple weeks ago. It says, Declaration of Ambassador Gordon Sondland. I, Gordon Sondland, do hereby swear and affirm as follows. I want you to look at point number 2, bullet point number 2, second sentence. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yermak on September 1st, 2019 in connection with Vice President Pence's visit to Warsaw and a meeting with President Zelensky. Now, this is his clarification. Let me read it one more time. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yermak on September 1st, 2019 in connection with Vice President Pence's visit to Warsaw and a meeting with President Zelensky. We got 6 people having 4 conversations in 1 sentence, and you just told me this is where you got your clear understanding. Which, I mean, even though you had 3 opportunities with President Zelensky for him to tell you, you know what? We're going to do these investigations to get the aid. Didn't tell you 3 different times. Never makes an announcement. Never tweets about it. Never does a CNN interview. Ambassador, you weren't on the call, were you? The president, you didn't listen on President Trump's call and President Zelensky's call?
I did not.
You've never talked with Chief of Staff Mulvaney?
I never did.
You never met the president?
That's correct.
You had 3 meetings again with Zelensky and it didn't come up.
And 2 of those they had never heard about as far as I know.
And
there was no reason for it.
President Zelensky never made an announcement. This is what I can't believe. And you're their star witness. You're their first witness.
Mr.
You're the
Jordan.
guy. You're the guy based on this. Based on, I mean, I've seen church prayer chains that are easier to understand than this. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told, now again, this is, I hereby swear and affirm from Gordon Sondland. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yermak on September 1st, 20. This all happens, by the way. This all happens, by the way, in Warsaw, where Vice President Pence meets with President Zelensky. And guess what?
Taylor,
they didn't talk about any linkage either.
Time the gentleman's expired.
So there you go. There's the deep evidence.
Yeah.
I've got one more clip, and this is from yesterday's hearing. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Mary Yovanovitch, is questioned about the evidence of Trump's criminal activities. And this is a nice short one, but this clip right here should put an end to this whole charade once and for all.
Do you have any information regarding the President of the United States accepting any bribes?
No.
Do you have any information regarding any criminal activity that the President of the United States has been involved with at all?
No.
So why are we here?
Exactly.
Why are we here? Go ahead.
If you go back to the hearing, where with the DNI, Joseph McGuire, one of the things that comes up is that the whistleblower, supposedly the whistleblower, gives the report to Michael Atkinson, that is the IG, the Inspector General for the intelligence community. And a conflict is created because the DNI has a statutory obligation to inform Congress of a whistleblower report. But what the whistleblower report did not fall under his statutory authority. So he consulted with the Office of Legal Counsel. And the Office of Legal Counsel is extremely important. It's probably one of the most important functions of government, because they are the legal advisors to the president for the executive branch. Mm-hmm. And apparently what the decisions of the OLC, Office of Legal Counsel, are law. Okay, so the DNI consulted with the OLC, and the OLC didn't see anything in the complaint to pursue, because the information in the complaint was all secondhand. Seems to me like go ahead, I'm sorry, finish. Oh, so I was going to say, so this whole thing is predicated Michael Atkinson accepting this complaint, whistleblower complaint, based on hearsay. Yeah. And it all kind of seems to be set up. Yeah. You know, because the DNI is statutorily obligated to inform Congress, but this whistleblower that was part of the national security thing is not in his area of responsibility. Mm-hmm. So they put the DNI in an untenable position of expecting him to do something that was out of his purview to do. Yeah, there's you know, and what's interesting is these offices. You're talking about the Office of Legal Counsel. That reminded me of the Office of Legislative Counsel. Because I think that's in the State Department. That's in the Congress. Okay. And the Office of Legislative Counsel, you know, we covered years ago. They came out with a I don't know, some kind of a, I don't know if you wouldn't call it a report. It was more of a, here's how things are done in government, and here's what our purpose is, I guess. Years ago, I don't know exactly when this was put out. I put it up on our website at governamerica.com. I'll put it back in the show notes. But as I search for it again, I find that it is still on the House.gov website. How our laws are made, a ghost writer's view. Now, we've been talking about the deep state, and we've been talking about shadow government, and how the elected people aren't really running the show. Yeah. I don't know if you remember this or not, but in this thing, let me just share a little bit of it for the listeners who haven't heard it before, and I don't know if you've heard it before or not, Vicky. Sandra Strokoff, who was at the time senior counsel of the Office of Legislative Counsel, the U.S. House of Representatives. She says, frequently on the floor of the House of Representatives, one will hear a member refer to another as the author, quote-unquote, of a bill who has, quote-unquote, carefully crafted the language of the proposed legislation. Statements like these make me smile, because if the members of the authors, then I and my colleagues in the Office of Legislative Counsel at the House of Representatives are the ghostwriters. The Office of Legislative Counsel, created by statute originally in 1918, is currently composed of 30-plus attorneys who generally toil in anonymity, at least as far as those outside the legislative process are concerned. Attorneys are charged with taking the idea of any member or committee of the House, requesting the services
of the office and transforming it into legislative language, or as one of my clients used to say, the magic words. We participate in all stages of the legislative process, be it preparing a bill for introduction, drafting amendments, participating in any conference of the two houses of Congress, to resolve differences between the two versions of the bill, or incorporating changes in the bill at each stage for publication and ultimately for presentation to the President. Frequently, we draft while debate is going on, both during committee consideration and on the House floor, and may be asked to explain the meaning or effect of legislative language. Although the office, and that's where you were referring to, whatever they say is law, because when they're explaining the meaning of the legislative language, then that would be interpreting the bill, and they would be the ones to have the final say. Anyway, she goes on and she says, although the office has drafting manuals and guidelines, drafting legislation is without question a matter of on-the-job training. For up to 2 years, a new attorney in the office, while communicating directly with clients, congressional staff members, but occasionally members themselves, on legislative requests, works under the tutelage of a senior attorney in preparation and preparing for introduction a wide variety of bills to gain as much experience as possible in developing drafting skills. Typically, only legislation that is unlikely to pass is given to a new attorney. Ironically, a new attorney's work will almost always include drafting a few amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Members of the Office of Legislative Counsel are bound by statute not to express views on or make policy with respect to legislation. Our responsibility is to reflect the ideas of members of Congress accurately in legislative language. That isn't to say that we can't affect policy by pointing out the consequences or meanings of the printed word. Trying to close loopholes before they open is a constant challenge. It is easy to overlook the consequences of the simplest word. Some years ago, a House bill authorizing the President to impose controls on exports to any foreign country or foreign policy reasons was amended to prohibit placing these controls on food. When the House was in conference with the Senate on the bill, the Senate staff referred to the provision as the Twinkies Amendment because food meant any kind of food exported for any reason. The conference agreement modified the provision to prohibit controls on exports of foods, but only food used to combat malnutrition. Most would not put Twinkies in that category. Attorneys in our office specialize in particular areas of law which we become reasonably conversant over a period of time. However, because of our relatively small number of attorneys handling anything that comes on the floor, we use the term specialist loosely. I don't want to get too far into this because we got to take a break here. But she says, let me skip down here. We draft legislation for all sides on the issues at the same time. Both Republicans and Democrats and factions within each party. We may be drafting the same legislation for different individuals. At times it would be much more efficient to be able to hook up several different clients who want to do roughly the same thing at the same time instead of having to produce multiple documents with enough modifications to make them look different. I mean, they're producing multiple bills on a variety of things for different clients and trying to make them look different to show that they're not coming from the same place. But we are strictly bound by the rules of attorney-client confidentiality. We are therefore frequently in the position of knowing what all sides are up to before anyone else does.
They're perpetrating a fraud on the people.
Yes,
with what they're doing.
Absolutely they are. It's crazy. I'll tell you what, we're late for the break. Let's take the break, and we'll continue into the final hour.
Truth for the restoration of our nation.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order. New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. Final hour here as we move rapidly on here on the 16th of November 2019. At the end of the last hour, I was just sharing with you how our laws are made, a ghostwriter's view. This is something we've shared on the show before. An actual piece on the House.gov website, still there, by the way. I don't know if it's been modified or not, but it was a piece written by Sandra Strokoff, who was at the time senior counsel. I've had this posted on governamerica.com. I posted it there December 19th, 2015. So it's been there for many, many years. So I don't know if this Sandra Strokoff is still there or not. But it doesn't matter because the people who, the office certainly is still there. And when Vicky mentioned the Office of Legal Counsel, it reminded me this is the Office of Legislative Counsel. So we have these groups of attorneys. This is what I would call the deep state, the permanent state, the people that are still there. It's not just the intelligence establishment running things. It is the people who are always in government, behind the scenes, and able to manipulate things and work the magic, the magic words, as they referred to, Vicky. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to me that they would come out right out and admit what they're doing. And you nailed it. You said they're perpetrating a fraud on the people. Why would you need to have multiple bills that say the same thing in different ways using different words to make them look different? I mean, why not bring everybody together and just hammer out legislation? If you need the bill to say something, here's what the bill is going to say.
Well, that's what the whole committee process used to do.
Exactly.
The committees used to decide on legislation and would write the legislation.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's a novel idea. Why even have an Office of Legislative Counsel in the first place? Why not have here's a novel idea, Vicky. Why not have the legislators themselves, who we pay for out of our tax dollars to do this job, actually write the bills and read the bills before they actually vote on them?
Well, they should read them, for sure. I don't know that we'd want... I mean, when you think of the composition of the members of Congress, would you really want those people writing legislation? I don't think so, because actually our law has gotten so technical and precise.
But
everything with law is precision.
Well, yeah, but I would assert...
and precision use of language. But I think a better system would be that there should be lawyers attached to the committees. All the ideas for legislation should come from what? Upon by the committees, which includes members from both houses, or both parties. And that's the way it should be written. It shouldn't just be handed off to some unknown, unseen bureaucrats with law degrees.
Yeah, well, I would assert that the laws would probably be less technical. There would certainly be a whole lot fewer of them if the members of Congress were the ones that actually had to craft them. I don't think we would have massive 500-page bills that Nancy Pelosi says you have to pass them in order to know what's in them. if we didn't have these offices.
That was the health care bill, and it was over 1,000 pages, and it was about 3 or 4 legislative packages that they put together that were written at different times, but they just put them all together.
Yeah, this is one thing they mentioned in here is the mega bill. She says in recent years, the volume of work coupled with extraordinary time constraints within which to do it have made the job as legislative counsel increasingly demanding. There has also been the advent of the mega bill. That is, instead of a bill dealing with a specific subject with the jurisdiction of one committee that more than likely began as the idea of one member of the House, a bill on a general subject for which many committees contribute provisions with their respective jurisdictions. The major mega bills created by the budget process, mandated by law, are the budget reconciliation bills encompassing changes in law required for each committee to meet prescribed budget targets for the coming fiscal year for matters within the respective jurisdictions. Our office is assigned the task of assembling these massive bills, which by their nature require coordinating the efforts of many attorneys in the office who handle the different jurisdictions. So that's where these mega bills come from. They're authored, they're put together by these people who are in the shadows, who are not elected, who are unaccountable to the people. They're just here's your shadow government, people. This is this is part of it anyway.
You're right, and the compressing of the time that the Congress people have to work to read these bills and understand what's in them, that's not a mistake. They do that intentionally so that they can get through a whole bunch of stuff that if you were to look at it individually,
it would never pass
you
muster.
Wouldn't go for it.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to the phones. We got a caller on the line. Jerry in Texas. Go ahead, Jerry. You're on the air.
Good Saturday afternoon, Vicky and Darren. I wasn't going to call in. I was just going to listen, keep my mouth shut for a change, but I can't help but open my mouth to change feet. Here in Texas, the state legislature comes together. I don't remember 60 days, something like that, every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we still get nefarious bills come through down the pike. I think they are in session too long, too often. But here's the biggest problem I see is lobbyists, special interest groups.
Mm-hmm.
If we could get these people out of the way and have our legislature look for the general welfare of the total populace instead of catering to special interest, things would be a whole lot simpler.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Both corporate lobbyists and nonprofit lobbyists. Our Congress has been, what's the word for it? They've been hijacked.
Yes.
And they really do not work for the American people. They work for the lobbyists, the people who fund them, either directly or indirectly, and the interests of those groups include the global system. You know, for corporations, a lot of corporations, they want this global system because it sets them free. Free to exploit the entire world, mostly to exploit our country, to use our resources and everything else in our country to make money elsewhere by producing and then re-importing back to this country, or however they make their arrangements. Basically, our country is being used as a mechanism for big profits for a few.
Yeah.
And our Congress, that should be working for us, that should be looking out for the interests of the people in this country,
they're helping to siphon off all the wealth.
Yeah, They're right, and they get their cut of the deal on the side, either through a spouse or a grown child, like Hunter Biden. There's no doubt that Daddy Biden is getting kickback somewhere from the kid.
Yeah, well, even if he's not, the point is it benefited a family member. And
yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, Dwight Eisenhower. I mean, that should have been a wake-up call when his farewell address wanted us against the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a tip of the area. If that's an issue, we got to be aware of. Then what else? I mean, agriculture. Most people don't realize that the federal food stamps, government food stamps, comes from the funding for the farmers, the agricultural funding, that the subsidies they get. That's included into their budget.
Mm-hmm.
And who has lobbied for that? Big corporate farmers.
Yep.
Because that's in their best interest to get those food stamps out there so that they can sell more food. Darren, I sent you a link to a Diet for a Dead Planet, referred that Christopher Cook, I think it is.
Okay.
I commend everybody. It's a hard read because it's facts and figures. But in a nutshell, it talks about, and this guy pulls all this stuff together. He's got footnotes and references and galore in there. But it's what the big agricultural industry in this country set out to destroy the agriculture in the third world nations, put the little farmer out of business by dumping our products, agricultural products, on those countries and forcing the little farmer out of business in those nations, going to the big city and go into the industrial occupations. Mm-hmm. And then when they do that, the United States, or the industrial nations, or whatever you want to call them, have got control of these little nations, because if you don't do what we're going to do, we're going to cut off your food supply and we're going to starve you to death.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Nutshell. I'd recommend everybody. It's like $3, $4 used. A friend of mine's got it. I got to get it back and read it again. But it's enough to make your hair stand on end. How these people manipulate other countries. It's scary.
Yeah, it really is. And are we immune to that?
No, we're not. I mean, that's what they've been doing in our country, isn't it?
The consolidation of our food supply in the hands of one or two huge major corporations, and
did you hear?
And they're using seeds that don't reproduce. Did I hear what?
About the largest dairy company has filed bankruptcy and no longer going to be in business.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know about that, but I have heard that Monsanto is on the hook to pay probably millions, if not billions of dollars to various victims. They're going to be in court for many, many years to come because of their Roundup giving people cancer. And, what happens if they go out of business and they're not able to furnish the farmers with all these seeds? The soil's been contaminated to the point where nothing will grow in it other than their seeds. This is a nightmare situation that's unfolding. It should have never been allowed to take place.
Well, and the dairy thing that he just mentioned, what's the name of the dairy?
Bean? I just read that 2 or 3 days ago, and I don't remember now. It's a big. What it was a membership type. What they call it, an association type organization. But the dairy processing and the bottling and distribution was by one big company.
Dean Foods?
Okay. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I'll look at that.
I'm looking at an article from Fox 8 Cleveland. America's largest milk producer files for bankruptcy, and they're saying it's Dean Foods.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is that they've had all this corporate takeover, and they expect these corporations to continue to grow, and they exceed the market. Their size exceeds the market. And so, then they wanted to go global with it, but some things you just can't really go global with. And I think agriculture, it should be one of those things. I mean, you should always be able to produce your own food.
Yeah.
But, where they've set up everything to be exported, all of our production to be exported, even though countries are blocking it, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, there are limits to growth, but not in the same way that the Club of Rome talked about.
Exactly.
There are limits within the constraints of a Wall Street system that has expectations of continued growth forever, growth in profit.
Yeah. I got to move on here, Jerry, real quick. I need to get to this New America event. You got any parting shot real quick?
No, except that I will look at that. I'll look for that story. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the call, Jerry.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Y'all have a good week.
Always enjoy talking to you. God bless you, my friend. All right, we'll talk later. All right, there he is, Jerry in Texas. All right, I wanted to get into this New American event that we were going to cover last week. This is featured Jesse Morton, an FBI informant, because we're talking about the deep state, we're talking about the shadow government, and as we often talk about on this broadcast, the technocratic tyranny, this web of control that's being woven around us through using technological means. It's interesting you sent me that article by email about, 147 or something new vulnerabilities in each smartphone before you even install anything on them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's an awful lot of ways for somebody who is trying to get into your phone and trying to get into your stuff to be able to spy on you. Isn't that interesting?
Well, everybody wants a piece of the action,
Yeah, and the FBI is trying, and the intelligentsia are trying their best to try to fight the advent of encryption on everything. And anyway, this New America event featured Jesse Morton, FBI informant, former Al-Qaeda recruiter, and propagandist. He's now the founder of Parallel Networks. He went through a number of components that he and his group had been working on, including the launching of magazines and online engagements of terrorists and terrorist groups. But it's interesting. My ears perked up when he summed it all up with this.
All of these components feed off of and into each other. So from a social service perspective, they are designed to approach the issue of violent extremism as a public health phenomenon and to demarcate each component of the brand so that it can fulfill engagement at levels of prevention, education, harm reduction, intervention, counter-messaging, restorative justice and rehabilitation, the whole social science or social service spectrum.
As a public health crisis.
That is huge. I mean,
Yes.
that is the Soviet model. If you have somebody who is contrary or they're unhappy with what their government is doing, all you do, you label them as a psychiatric case.
Yeah.
Mentally ill.
And that's how they're going to get the guns, too. That's how they...
Right, and then you've got all these social services managers managing your whole damn life.
Yeah. You've got the red flag laws where they can say somebody is being looked at. We've said often on this broadcast and over the years that they're not going to come out and say that you can't own a firearm. I don't, at least not right away. If they ever do, it'll be to the point where it's so many years down the road. The way they do it American style, say, yeah, the Second Amendment is here. Yeah, you have the right to do that. However, common sense gun legislation dictates that, well, we can't have mentally ill people owning firearms. Now, can we? I mean, wouldn't we all agree that mentally ill people shouldn't have a gun?
Right, so you just make it easy to flag people as mentally ill.
Everybody in the whole country is mentally ill.
And you're mentally ill.
Everybody's mentally ill. Everybody. We're all mentally ill now, Vicky. I mean,
I don't know. I'm getting there.
You look at the psychological, look at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual on Mental Disorders, and every single person in the whole country would fall into some category. So that's what common sense gun legislation is designed to do. And people are going on emotions, and I get it. You know, it's scary when you have people getting shot. I mean, we just had, one or two, we had more school shootings this week. And I didn't even have it.
Santa Clarita.
Yeah, Santa Clarita. Was it the only one? Because I thought there might have been another one, too. I'm not sure. I lose track. Who can keep track of all this stuff? Mm-hmm. But
well, and I think the schools themselves are creating a lot of the mental illness because of all of the policies of social justice. Our schools are no longer about education. They are about
brainwashing,
socialization and assessment and did I say social justice? They are trying to,
which is brainwashing.
It is brainwashing, and they are trying to make.
They're trying to make you cut out there.
Right, and so you can't make everybody equal if you are using objective measures, because some people are smarter than others. That is a fact of life, you know.
Yeah.
So if you're one of these social justice people, then you have to change the criteria.
Well, we got to
right?
have everybody be dumb.
That's the way they do everything. They just change the criteria, but they don't announce it. They just do it.
Well, you got to bring the highest down to the lowest. That's the only way you can have social justice. Because
right, so
if you got somebody,
the criteria.
If somebody is gifted,
everybody gets a trophy for participation.
There you go. Thank you. That's exactly where I was going. We can't keep score in sports events anymore because it would be unfair to the losing team. So we got to be able to bring the highest down to the lowest.
And what does that do to the kids who are above average?
It makes them never want to try again because there's no incentive to try.
They give up. I mean, what's the point?
There's no incentive to do well. There's only incentive to tread water. And this is why communism has failed every place it's ever been tried. Because communism is based upon social justice, is it not?
Yeah. Well, they need to appeal to the lower masses, you know, to say that you the reason you're not succeeding is not because you sit on your dead rear end, or not that you're not very bright and you need a job pumping gas or something like that. They tell people that the reason that you're not succeeding is because you're oppressed.
Yeah.
You know, somebody is holding you down.
Yeah. And yeah, we could talk all day about that because, man, do they always promote victimhood. Oh, my goodness. Well, anyway.
Well, and I've thought about this quite a bit, about opportunities that are people have available to them. There is nobody in the country available to them than people who live in the inner cities.
Yeah.
Now, people that grew up in a small farm town like I grew up in, there were no opportunities. There were no museums. There were no colleges. There was no theater. Well, we did have a civic auditorium, and occasionally a play would come through town. But there was really nothing, you know. So in terms of opportunities available, the people in the inner cities should be able to succeed given the opportunities available to them. People that come from rural communities should be, you know, with the hayseed in their hair, hanging out on the farm still, because there were no opportunities there.
I'm going to blow off the bottom of the
somehow
break.
They managed to get out and thrive. So how does that work? How does that work. It does. If you're looking at things from a social justice point of view, and if you're honest about your analysis, then it's not oppression. It's lack of desire.
Well, you're asking way too much for them to be honest. That's for sure.
True.
So anyway, they talk a lot about the infiltration of groups.
Going forward, now we have to advance and expand the parallel network. We've only been up and running this for publicly, light upon light ecosystem for 6 months. We'll expand it through activity within each of the ecosystem's essential components. So we'll be building out more research. We have already heavily embedded and are in contact with networks such as Antifa, the Incel movement, Proud Boys, where control, delete, hate will be disseminated. We've already contacted several of the hubs of those communities to do so. Our grassroots intervention efforts have already established sufficient sample sizes necessary for empirical qualitative research. We'll also release a report on the Ahutakwa Project, and we'll pursue other initiatives as well. We'll be looking to form more partnerships. We've been networking with the peace-building community and already have put together an impressive team that will organize a center for the study of trauma and radicalization. We've collaborated with Ideas Beyond Borders to translate the Ahutakwa magazine into Arabic and to expand our influence into the Muslim majority world. We'll be taking back ISIS's Al-Naba newsletter, utilizing the same approach as Ahutakwa in Arabic. We're looking to expand into Australia, into Canada, and Western Europe as well. We'll engage social media companies and request their support promoting the Schiff Tape helpline and making sure that users looking for extremist content are provided access and pathways to the Light Upon Light messaging hub.
Now this is...
so what is he really talking about? He's talking about IT systems. He's talking analysis and then using the data through the network that he talked about before, the social services network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it's all about. That's all our government is about at this point. And the NGOs, it's all about the data. It is all about the system.
Yeah. Now this is Brad Galloway, who is the Research and Intervention Specialist for the Organization for Prevention of Violence. He's talking about taking advantage of infighting among the quote-unquote far-right groups. It's important to stress that he's talking about neo-Nazi groups and such, but the same tactics can be applied to any group that the government wants to silence and disrupt.
These guys will always fracture each other, too, the infighting. Mm-hmm. It led me right into thinking about how they're never satisfied with just the one group. It ends up fracturing, and these are good intervention points, especially for law enforcement and for us as interventionists trying to say, okay, well, this group looks like it's fracturing. Let's go see if we can talk to some of these members, whether it be online or if police want to do typical door knock scenarios, just go and check in on these guys and see what they're up to. I mean, that's where community can sort of mix with I think with the different agencies that are out there that are looking into these groups too. I know in the Canadian perspective, some of this has been a bit of a challenge seeing these different types of groups coming up, but definitely this infighting thing is definitely leading to these groups falling apart too. So we want to take advantage of those scenarios.
So counterintelligence program operations. It's fascinating to me just to hear them talk about how they're using the infighting among these various groups to help to penetrate them and help to break them up.
I suspect they start. It's just like John was saying about the prince. They create their own enemies to then fight, and then that way they win.
Yeah, and you see it all the time online. Different trolls doing different things. I don't want to mention the guy's name, but we just recently had a situation, you and I, with a troll that was on one various social media platforms, and I don't know what this guy's intentions are, but I know they're not good. Certainly, what he was doing was not good. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he admits this. That, going back to the hearing, they admit that they cannot adequately define what a hate group is.
So tying directly into your e-zine, it mentions 954 hate groups that were identified in the U.S. in 2017. So can you give us an idea of what's the nature of these groups? How many of them are violent? How many are still active?
So that's a number that was drawn from ADL reporting, and it's an important one. I think it's hard to categorize what is a hate group. right? So this is the question. Like, hate is a lot harder to find than violent extremism.
Okay, again, for all the money these think tanks have, they have crap for audio. They don't know that. I don't know how they can find people. They can't seem to find people that can run audio, and it drives me nuts here as a radio guy to have to deal with this crappy audio. But he says they can't adequately define what hate is.
Right, because it depends on your life point of view.
Exactly. And yet they're pushing hate crime legislation, hate this, hate that.
And it's an important one. I think it's hard to categorize what is a hate group, right? So this is the question. Like, hate is a lot harder to find than violent extremism, because in order to hate, you don't have to explicitly call for violence, but there's an implicit association with it. One of the key things that ADL points out, particularly, is that members of these hate groups oftentimes don't act in the name of the ideology or in the cause of the movement, but because they're associated and affiliated with this network that is promoting hate and extremism, they oftentimes go on to commit violence in other realms of their life. Domestic violence is very important. So these could be anywhere, if you look at the list, they could be anywhere from 5 groups of guys pamphleteering on campus all the way.
What's that?
I said that is such crap, what he just said. They go on to commit domestic violence. Sorry, I just couldn't let that one go by.
Yeah, they're so full of hate that they hate everybody, including their wives and their children, and they just beat everybody up.
Domestic violence is very important. So these could be anywhere, if you look at the list, they could be anywhere from 5 groups of guys pamphleteering on a campus all the way on up to National Socialist Movement, which is one of the larger entities. The fact that they're so dispersed is an indication that there is very far right's harder to understand. There's a paper released this morning from ICCT that tried to demarcate between nativism, anti-government, and racist violence. But there's so many different strands. The phenomenon we're seeing now, post-Tehran, is the transnationalization of the ideology revolving around the Great Replacement theory and its adoption by almost every single facet of the far right.
Now, you got anything you want to say about that?
The Great Replacement theory, as if the United States population is being replaced by allowing people to breach our borders, allowing massive numbers of people to come here on H-1B visas, massive numbers of people on refugee status. Yeah, they are replacing our native population.
No question about it.
So I suppose that puts me in a hate group because I noticed.
Yeah. Well, you just got to keep your mouth shut. You're not allowed to say things against these people that they're bringing in. They've weaponized the populations of people from other countries. They're weaponizing people, different groups against each other. I mean, they are the bullets. The migration is the bullet in this weapon against borders.
Right.
It's very clear.
This defines asymmetric warfare as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And when I was working on the refugee issue, because they're dumping refugees here in this small town that I live in, it seemed to me that the Statue of Liberty was a declaration of war.
Yeah.
Give us your poor, your tired.
Give us the worst that you have.
Yeah, give us your dregs.
Give us your organized crime.
Everything.
Yeah, your mafia members, the people that behead people and hang bodies, decapitated bodies from overpasses. Those are what we want because we're right. America.
Great deal for the other countries to unload their undesirables.
Wow, I don't know what just happened. I had a big chunk of ice fall off the house. That's weird. Made a big loud crash.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it sounded almost like gunfire. All right. Anyway, we got to quit hating. Anyway, Jeff Schiff of Parallel Networks outreach coordinator. He's an outreach coordinator for this Parallel Networks. He was asked what drew him into the neo-Nazi movement.
Starting out in it, it's something.
Yeah, he's a recruiter. As I said, he's a recruiter, and it almost sounds like he's still recruiting when you listen to how he describes it.
That literally anybody can get involved in it. I know a lot of people have a story that's, they came from a bad home or they had some sort of trauma. And I want the public to understand that it's something that literally anyone can be recruited into.
Okay, so right there, anybody can be involved. So if you come from a bad home, Vicky, and you need a place to plug in, hey, there it is. Anybody can join.
And for some, they're looking for brotherhood. They're looking for a network of people to be part of. For others, it's ideological based. For me, it was more ideological based. We utilized our recruitment tactics under many different ways. If someone was religious, we would use Christian identity. If someone was, really into music, we'd use music. If someone was into the politics, we'd use the politics. Someone had a bad experience with someone of another race, we'd use that. So there's not one specific tool that's used to bring people in, and that's what we have to look at as far as bringing people out too. In the movement, you have to understand, we had an answer for everything. We had the National Socialist Movement was producing video games. Two different video games that were produced over the years. We had, and I think the group still has, at least 5 radio shows, podcasts.
Radio shows? That sounds good.
Every day of the week, people can call in, ask questions. There was online chats. There was a forum. There was music and bands.
Music and bands.
There was family barbecues.
Barbecues. I love barbecues.
All kinds of things. So it's an entire culture all wrapped into one.
This sounds great. Sign me up.
Right. Well, they're creating demand is what they're doing. They're creating demand for the systems that they want to develop. Mm-hmm. They need systems to manage people. And so the way that you get the power to manage people is to have them involved, get them involved in some kind of deviance. It doesn't make any difference what kind of deviance it is, but once you get into the system to where they have you by the short hairs, mm-hmm. and they have authority over your life, then you are an object for them to manage.
Now, it's funny that you put it that way, because the very next clip talks about how the mainstream media helps to promote these radical viewpoints.
Some of the stuff that we espoused publicly was just to get into the press, mm-hmm. right? And so they put us on CNN and they would put us on Fox News. But the number one thing that we concentrated on was we knew that if we could get the anti-Islamic bloggers to get more awareness and to arm them with the ammunition they needed to say that the Muslims were coming to implement Sharia law, that we could create a further divisive polarization. And that if we created anti-Muslim sentiment, then we would confirm our narrative that they were waging a war against Islam, because we could just point to Pamela Geller as our evidence. And so it wasn't so much the mainstream media. Mainstream media was great because your website will go from getting a couple thousand hits a day to getting hundreds of thousands of hits a day. So, we kind of had mastered that art form. It's very interesting the way that media works, because you would think that there would be an overwhelming interest in promoting some positive work, like the work that we're doing. If we were out there, promoting a rally against, against for white civil rights or something, we'd have massive media lined up today. Nobody wants to cover the positive stories because that's not what sells and gets ratings. Mm-hmm. And so it's the sensationalism that drives the media, and the symbiotic relationship between extremist movements, terrorist movements, and the media. It's so easy for us to exploit that, and we used to always do that. And immediately what you do then, too, is what people don't realize is if you can draw media to your website or to your social media account, your number of followers go up, but you also get up higher in the rankings of Google search engines. So you start to appear, not anymore. They sort of come around that, and now they've actually made it even worse without realizing it. But, yeah, I mean, there's a really important, it's the importance of getting into the mainstream media with the activity that you do is key to the work of a recruiter and a radicalizer.
Mm-hmm. And for us in the National Socialist Movement, we had a press release department. We actually had a guy that was a journalist before that would write it in the way that you would submit it to the press, and would send out mass emails to all the press in the area at the time, and we'd send it, I'd tell them, like, in the subject line, put Nazi, put something that's going to jump out, because if you just put National Socialist Movement press release, a lot of the press wasn't going to look. So we became sort of experts in a sense on how to manipulate that. We knew it wasn't going to be good press no matter what, but that didn't matter. As long as they weren't saying really, really bad things, mm-hmm. we knew that we could reach the public through the press like nothing we ever did before. So we would do public rallies, and we'd announce we were going to be here. We'd sometimes challenge people to debates and things like that. Anything to generate press and activity. It would focus traffic to our websites, to our shows and things like that, and it would you're gonna break through and get to some people no matter what. And for us, it was, even if we spend the time and energy going to a city and say we only have 20 guys out there, which is a small number by comparison, if those guys are flying NSM flags, the press is going to come out. If the Antifa comes out and attacks us, even better, because now there's violence and the press has to report on it, even if there's a media blackout, because that's been a tactic. We started wondering why in some areas the press wasn't covering us, because they were non-eventful events. If we clashed with the other side, guaranteed press.
So institutionalized racism created disenfranchised people. Everyone's rights should be promoted regardless of skin color. See, that's kind of an interesting thing, how, the role of the press and how he's saying that they can use this to steer coverage in whatever way they want.
Mm-hmm.
The press operates, the media operates for clicks, and they operate for eyeballs and viewership. So they try to sensationalize everything. And so anytime there's a disenfranchised group, they're going to be able to capitalize upon that. So why have
disenfranchised group organized by people like this guy or the FBI? The FBI is infamous for doing this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or the CIA. And so, because most people won't participate in this kind of group unless something happens, if
I would suggest,
or they fit into the category, like you said, they need brotherhood or whatever.
I believe that a good majority probably of these groups are just made up of people with a genuine gripe. They even refer to that in here, in this hearing. That there are some people who, a lot of these people have legitimate reasons to be either concerned, worried, or otherwise disenfranchised in some way, but they're involved in a part of a group that some of whom, a small percentage of whom, will take it to an extreme and do something violent or whatever, or are waging.
But they probably would not organize, even if they had a gripe. They probably would not organize, because it takes a special kind of person, a special kind of personality to organize a group.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm getting at with the media manipulation, it's problematic when you turn on the TV, and I felt it myself as a white male. Whenever I turn on the TV and I see, white men especially, but white people beaten up on all the time in the media, it kind of wears on you, because I haven't done the things that they claim that white people are guilty of doing. Slavery was over before I ever came along. I never owned any slaves. I mean, there might have been some relatives in the past who have, but I had nothing to do with that. I want all of mankind, regardless of skin color, to be bettered, to be improved. But I don't want it to be done at the cost of enslaving me or my race or my children. So am I an evil person because I don't want... It just seems problematic that every single race around, and we're talking about race as a group, but, that's what they're talking about, neo-Nazis. I'm certainly not a neo-Nazi. But I also see that the pendulum seems to be swinging the other way in certain extents, to certain degrees.
Right. Well, that's where you have to use logic and say, does this make sense logically? If it doesn't make sense logically, there's another reason for it. And this is the strategy of how the communists take over. Divide and conquer.
Yes.
Simple as that. Divide and conquer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's problematic when you have a situation where every single race, any race, regardless of which race it is, black, Hispanic, Asian, you name it, they can all be proud of who they are. And yet, whoever coins the phrase white pride. If you do that, you're a neo-Nazi. You're a white supremacist. You're a racist. You're a hater. And I think that's a problem that society is going to have to deal with at some point, unless we're just marked for extinction and we have to be eliminated. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But it just seems...
That's kind of that's what it seems like to me, actually. If, we get down to brass tacks and I'm absolutely honest about it, I think that is the goal. That is the objective.
But why? Is the one question I can't answer is why? But every single person on the face of the earth should be able to have their own culture. They should be able to be proud of who they are. I mean, because I can't change my skin color. I can't change that. That's in my DNA. That's who I am. But I'm not allowed in this society, in this culture, to be proud of who I am. That's problematic. And you will never solve the race problem until you solve that. So, anyway, that's my little soapbox speech. Getting back to it, they talk about GAB and Brad Galloway Organization for the Prevention of Violence.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about GAB and Telegram, just as examples. It seems like violent extremist groups are always one step ahead, and everyone who's trying to counter that is behind because we're trying to also change course as we go along. And if they're actively pursuing ways to engage on different platforms that mainstream or people are trying to counter the narratives or counter the work are doing, what are we missing? What's the next thing after Gab and Telegram?
I think that no matter what we do, there's going to be an echo chamber that they're going to create for themselves in some area of the internet. They'll find some place to do it, whether it be online or offline. But in the online space, I think that recently somebody sent me this thing. It was 100,000 different videos on Telegram of music, hate music. Right? So what is that about? Well, that's just about them saying, well, you know what? Screw it. YouTube's taking all of our stuff down. We're just going to go here and we can share away as we want. And, that's just going to be the way that it's going to go. Now, which company is going to do, what are they going to do? Moderate it? How are they going to do? Remove it? Each company has their different way of looking at it. So, but yeah, I guess in the sense of Gab, they're obviously these guys want to. It is a social in-group, so these guys want to socialize. They want to hear from each other about what it is that they're, what the next steps are for their movement, what the next steps are for what should they be doing, or what things did they do bad in the past where they can work on those things. I mean, there's a lot of that talk used to happen on Stormfront. And it would be regional, but now they've said, well, Stormfront is a lot of Antifa are on there and a lot of law enforcement are on there, so why don't we just make a platform for ourselves? So, I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, it's called free speech. Big tech censorship is just going to drive them to other platforms like Gab or wherever they can go. I mean, people are going to communicate no matter what you do. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I don't know if you have anything to add. We got a couple calls on the line. Do we still have Vicky? I don't know what happened to Vicky. Vicky, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you were hiding on me.
My phone was ringing. I had to go shut it off.
Okay. Yeah, well, you were hiding on me. Yeah, I was just saying, he's bemoaning the fact that people are able to communicate. Imagine that. Got a couple of calls on the line. Well, one of them dropped. Okay, we'll go to this caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air. To the caller that dropped, you're welcome to call back. Go ahead. How you doing, Art?
Hey, Darren. Hey, Vicky. This is Art. Talking about this. I'm kind of with you on in a way. I'm thinking. This attack on white people. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, first 14 years of my life in the ghetto, predominantly black neighborhood, and it wasn't really a very white boy friendly neighborhood. I couldn't even walk to the corner store, which was just up the end of the block. I couldn't even walk there without taking my 3 dogs with me for fear of being jumped and robbed. When I'd get off get off of the school bus at home, it was almost like a mad dash to the house to see, because there were, black kids always wanting to beat up on us white kids. And so, and this is during the 60s and 70s when we got the race riots and all that kind of crazy stuff going on.
Uh-huh.
And so, but we kind of evolved from that, and eventually we learned to live, coexist in a very diverse neighborhood. But now it's getting to the point that I find myself now with this white guilt movement, and you have to feel guilty because you're white, there's white privilege, all of this other kind of crap, where I'm at the point now that whenever somebody walks up, I won't turn my back. If I go to a restaurant, I will not sit with my back to the door. I'm always looking around me constantly. I used to never be like that, but I'm at the point now
where you get paranoid. You get paranoid, and I'll tell you right now, I know exactly what you're talking about because I felt it too. During the height of the Trayvon Martin thing, you remember when that whole Trayvon Martin thing was going on?
And we had that
this media frenzy was taking place, and I was actually scared to go out in public for fear of being attacked.
Yeah, we had that leader of the Black Panther, Cheryl, whatever her name was, president of the Black Panther chapter down in Tampa, Florida, talking about needing to go after white people.
Yeah. And this is a problem. And when you got...
So now,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And so now it's like I can't go anywhere without looking over my shoulder, wondering who's walking up behind me. And I'm getting to the point now. I used to never be racist, guys. I am now... to a degree, I've become very racist.
Well, it's important to know. It's important to know and keep in mind that it's not all black people, and it's not all of any one particular race. I don't want to pick on the black people because Hispanics, Asians, whatever. It's not one particular. People are individuals, but what I see going on here, Art, is I see all of this animosity being stirred, against one group or the other, and I don't know why. For some reason, maybe it's just convenient or easy to do. Maybe it's become more politically acceptable to do because of the history, of what we had prior to the civil rights movement in this country. But it's been real easy to use all of these other races as a boiling point to attack the white race. And I think ultimately the plan is to divide and conquer. First and foremost, they want to keep us all fighting amongst each other so that we don't realize that all of us are becoming slaves on the plantation now.
Right. Yeah, and that's really it, Darren. You hit the nail on the head right there. And it isn't just an issue with black and white. It's also brown, Mexicans and illegals that have come to our country. And I've been told, actually, that this is not our country anymore, I don't know whose country it is, but if you're a Native American, it's not your country.
Yeah.
And that's all part of the regionalization and globalization and the elimination of the nation state.
Yep, there it is.
Well, let's not forget, when we got people like Don Lemon out there talking about needing an open season on white people, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Not help.
But he's the agitator. He's one of the agitators.
Exactly.
And I don't know why he's allowed to get away with that. I don't know why he is not pulled off the air.
Because he's serving their purpose. Obviously, somebody wants him to do that.
Tokyo Rose.
Yes, somebody wants him to do that. That's why he's not pulled off the air. For the same reason that somebody can say on a Twitter post or a Facebook post to kill Whitey, and that stays there, but something else. And they mentioned that in that hearing that we were just playing clips from. That they mentioned that as a recruitment tool for the neo-Nazis when they can post something and something violent speech against white people and that not be pulled down, and then they turn around and post something against another race, and immediately it's pulled down, and they point to that and say, look here, see, this is proof that your race is under attack. And they use that to further their goals.
Yeah.
So we can only assume.
Which is what the issue is with Trump. You're not allowed to defend yourself. Yeah. The left is saying, we're just going to beat the crap out of you, whether it's through the media or whatever, but you're not allowed to defend yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know this audience, and I think we all want everyone to excel and to benefit, but we don't want to do it at the expense of one race. What we're really talking about is genuine fairness, genuine equality. And by equality, I don't mean everybody necessarily has the same wealth levels, but certainly the same opportunities, whatever. I don't wish ill on anybody, but I don't want ill to come on me either.
Not necessarily the same outcome. You have to earn the outcome.
Exactly. Well, we're just about out of time, and that's the outcome that we're facing.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks, Art. I appreciate the call, and we'll talk later. And there he is, Art.
Boy, fastest 3 hours in radio.
Yeah, and I only got about halfway through this audio. There's a lot more to go. Maybe we'll revisit it at a later date because there's other things. But
oh boy, you really know how to stir up the.
Well, I try not to
stir the pot.
I try not to stir hornets' nests. But I think it's a subject that needs to be dealt with from time to time.
That program was unbelievable. I really recommend that everybody go watch that.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to believe you're hearing what you're hearing.
Yeah. And I mean, they're very open about it. And you know what? One thing that is interesting is they were kind of critical of the ADL, which is interesting because I'm sure they work hand in glove with the ADL. But they said that they don't like the way the ADL phrases certain things because that helps exacerbate the problem. Surprise, surprise, huh?
Yeah.
The ADL. The ADL exacerbating the problem.
Calling the kettle black, I think.
Yeah. Well, folks, we're out of time. Thanks for joining us. Pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. Join us back here next week. And I have no idea what we're going to be talking about, but I'm sure there's going to be no shortage of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, that we can be sure of.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Vicky. I appreciate, as always, everything you do.
Okay, thank you. Same to you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye. And bye to you, folks. Tell somebody about the broadcast and join us back here next week. And we'll be here, Lord willing. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.